Your Honor, I threw money at a man and called it justice. I was wrong.
In over 40 years of presiding in this courtroom, I've learned a bitter truth. You cannot judge a person's wealth by their bank balance, but you can certainly judge the poverty of their soul by how they treat those who can do absolutely nothing for them. That Tuesday morning started with a relentless downpour, but the real gloom didn't settle in until Tyler Sterling stepped into my chambers. Tyler was barely in his early 20s, but he carried himself with the heavy air of someone who owned the world. His hair was slicked back perfectly. His suit cost more than $5,000, and the Rolex on his wrist sparkled under the fluorescent lights. A piece of jewelry that a hard-working man would have to toil for an entire year just to afford. Tyler didn't walk. He paraded. He entered with a half smirk, eyes glued to his phone, completely ignoring the bailiff's repeated requests to silence his device. He was the heir to a massive real estate empire, and it was clear he believed his father's checkbook could buy anything, including the very air he breathed in this room. On the opposite side of the podium stood Elias Thorne, 72 years old, with calloused hands and a coat that had seen better decades. Mr. Elias was a retired janitor, a man who had spent his life cleaning up the world's messes to put his children through school. He stood there, his shoulders trembling slightly from nerves, his eyes weary but filled with the quiet dignity of a man who had never owed anyone a dime. The contrast between the two was a jagged blade across the conscience of everyone present. The case stemmed from a minor traffic accident on a busy commercial street. Tyler's brand new Lamborghini had slammed into the back of Mr. Elias's aging sedan from the 90s. But the issue wasn't the dented metal. It was what happened after the impact. Witnesses testified that the moment Tyler stepped out of his car, instead of checking on the elderly man, he began screaming. He called Mr. Elias trash, a drain on society, and in a moment of pure cruelty, he pulled a wad of cold, hard cash from his pocket and threw it directly at the shaking old man's face. He told him, "Take this and buy yourself a life, you pathetic old man." As I looked through the file, I saw more than a traffic violation. I saw an assault on human dignity. If you believe that character matters more than power and that kindness should never be trampled by money, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens in the next 10 minutes in my courtroom will prove that here, every luxury car and expensive watch becomes worthless in the face of true justice. I looked at Tyler Sterling, who was currently letting out a long, bored yawn. "Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice low and steady, "I have read the reports. Do you have any explanation for your behavior?" He simply shrugged, a shrug so full of contempt it made the air in the room feel heavy. "Your Honor, I'm a busy man. I paid the old guy on the spot. Isn't the whole point of the law to provide compensation? I paid double what that piece of junk was worth. Can we wrap this up so I can make my lunch reservation?" The courtroom fell into a deafening silence. I could see Inspector Quinn gritting his teeth beside me. Tyler's arrogance wasn't just an insult to Mr. Elias. It was a slap in the face to the system of justice we have spent our lives defending. He thought he could turn a sin into a business transaction. But he was wrong. He was about to learn that some lessons cannot be bought. And the price of decency in Judge Simpson's court is always higher than any Lamborghini. In my years on the bench, I've seen that a courtroom is often the only place where the person who cleans the floors and the person who owns the building stand on level ground. But Tyler Sterling didn't see it that way. To him, this room was just a minor detour, an annoying stoplight on his way to somewhere more important. As the prosecutor, Maria Santos, began to play the dashcam footage, the atmosphere in the room changed. It wasn't just cold, it was heavy with the weight of a truth that Tyler had tried to bury with cash. The video was clear. It showed Tyler's sleek, neon blue Lamborghini weaving through traffic like the road was his private racetrack. Then came the screech of tires and the sickening thud of expensive carbon fiber meeting old American steel. You could see Mr. Elias's sedan jerk forward, a violent shudder that looked like it might snap the old man's neck. but it was the audio that made the gallery gasp. Before the dust had even settled, Tyler was out of his car. He didn't look at the damage. He didn't look to see if the 72-year-old man behind the wheel was breathing. He marched straight to the driver's side window of the sedan and began his assault. "Do you have any idea what you just did to my car?" he screamed, his face turning a shade of purple that matched his silk tie. "This car costs more than your entire family tree is worth. Why are you even on the road in this piece of junk?" I watched Tyler as he watched the video of himself. He wasn't cringing. He wasn't looking down in shame. He was checking his watch. He was literally counting the seconds until he could leave. Beside him, Mr. Elias sat with his head bowed, his hands clasped so tightly together that his knuckles were white. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. "Mr. Thorne," I said, leaning forward, my voice softening, "tell me what happened next. The report says Mr. Sterling offered you money." Mr. Elias stood up slowly, his knees popping, a sound that reminded me of my own father after a long day at the construction site. "He didn't offer it, Your Honor," he said quietly, his voice thin but steady. "He threw it. He pulled out a roll of $100 bills, snapped the rubber band, and pelted me with them through the window. He told me that for a man like me, this was hitting the lottery. He said I should thank him for hitting me because now I could finally afford a decent suit for my funeral." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks. I looked at Tyler. "Is that true, Mr. Sterling? Did you tell a man who could be your grandfather that he should be grateful you crashed into him?" Tyler sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Look, Your Honor, let's be real. He's driving a car held together by duct tape and prayers. I gave him $3,000 in cash. That's triple the Blue Book value of that sedan. I was being generous. Most people would have just let the insurance companies fight it out for 6 months. I gave him a shortcut to a better life. If he's offended by the way I delivered the help, that's a personality flaw, not a legal one." "A shortcut to a better life." I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air like a bad smell. "You believe that your money gives you the right to dictate the value of another human being's dignity? You think that because you can pay for the damage, the disrespect is free? Respect isn't part of the fine schedule, is it?" Tyler shot back, his arrogance finally finding its edge. "I'm here for a traffic ticket. I've got the money. Just tell me the number so I can go." If you're watching this and you feel that fire in your chest, the one that burns when someone thinks their bank account makes them a king, leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you saw someone try to buy their way out of being a decent human being. Share this video because we are about to find out exactly what happens when a busy man meets a judge who has all the time in the world to teach a lesson. I sat back in my chair and looked at Tyler Sterling. He was smiling now, a confident, "I've got this" kind of smile. He thought he had me figured out. He thought I was just another bureaucrat he could pay off. He had no idea that in my courtroom the currency isn't dollars, it's character. And right now, Tyler Sterling was completely bankrupt. The tension in the courtroom was so thick you could almost feel it on your skin. Tyler Sterling sat there, tapping his expensive leather shoe, looking at the ceiling as if the historical architecture of this building was the only thing worth his attention. He didn't realize that in my court, silence isn't just an absence of noise, it's a space where the truth catches up to you. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice echoing slightly off the marble walls. "You mentioned earlier that you are a busy man. You mentioned your lunch reservation. You even mentioned that you consider $3,000 to be a shortcut to a better life for Mr. Elias. It seems you have a very specific price tag for everything." Tyler looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Exactly, Your Honor. I'm a capitalist. Everything has a market value. A dented bumper on a 30-year-old car is worth a few $100. I gave him thousands. In my world, that's called a win-win." "I see," I replied, leaning back. "But tell me, what is the market value of a man's peace of mind? What is the price of the dignity you stripped away when you threw that money at his face like he was an animal in a cage? What is the cost of the fear he felt when your car, a weapon in the hands of someone so reckless, shuttered his entire world?" Tyler let out a short, sharp laugh. "With all due respect, Judge, you're getting poetic. Peace of mind doesn't have a line item in an insurance claim. I paid for the metal. The rest is just noise. It was at that exact moment that Tyler's phone went off again. A sharp, high-pitched electronic trill that cut through the solemnity of the room. He didn't even look at me for permission. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the latest titanium smartphone, and looked at the screen. I have to take this, he muttered, already swiping to answer. Hey, did the wire go through? No, tell the board I'll be there in 15... Bam. I didn't just tap the gavel. I struck it with the weight of 40 years of frustration. The sound cracked like a gunshot through the room. Tyler jumped, nearly dropping his phone. The gallery went dead silent. Put the phone down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to freeze the air. Tyler stared at me, his eyes wide with genuine shock. Judge, this is a multi-million-dollar closing. I don't care if it's a mission to Mars, Mr. Sterling. You are standing in a court of law before a bench that represents the people of this state. You have shown nothing but contempt for the man you hit, and now you are showing contempt for this institution. You think your time is the only clock that matters? Let me tell you something. My clock just started, and it's ticking for you. I turned to the prosecutor. Ms. Santos, please remind the court of the maximum penalties for reckless endangerment and the statutory fines for multiple counts of verbal assault and harassment in a traffic incident. As the prosecutor began to read, Tyler's smirk finally vanished. He started to realize that this wasn't going to be a pay-and-go afternoon. He looked over at Mr. Elias, who was watching him with a look of profound sadness. Not anger, just sadness. It was the look of a man who had seen 1,000 Tylers in his life and knew that all the money in the world couldn't fill the hole where a soul should be. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt invisible because someone with a louder voice or a bigger wallet pushed you aside, I want you to know, I see you. Leave a comment with the word dignity if you believe that no amount of money justifies disrespect. Share this video because the lesson Tyler Sterling is about to learn is going to cost him a lot more than a lunch reservation. I looked back at Tyler. His face was pale now. The busy man was finally sitting still. Mr. Sterling, I said, you wanted to know the number. You wanted to know the price of your convenience. Well, I've decided to stop looking at the blue book value of the car and start looking at the moral value of your character. And I can tell you right now, you're going to find the exchange rate very, very painful. The air in the courtroom shifted from tense to clinical. I watched Tyler Sterling's face as he realized I wasn't joking about the exchange rate. He looked around the room, perhaps hoping to find a friendly face or a high-priced attorney to shield him. But he found only the steady, unblinking gaze of justice. Mr. Sterling, I began, folding my hands on the bench, you mentioned that you are a CEO. You run a tech firm, correct? Prescott Digital Solutions? Or perhaps a similar empire built on efficiency and market value? Tyler nodded, a bit of his old posture returning, though his eyes remained wary. Then you understand the concept of a penalty clause. In business, when you breach a contract, there is a cost. When you breach the social contract of human decency, the cost is significantly higher. I turned my attention to the financial disclosure form sitting on my desk. I see here that your personal compensation last year was in the neighborhood of $2.3 million. That means mathematically that $500 fine you were expecting is worth about 15 minutes of your time. To you, that fine isn't a punishment. It's a parking fee. It's a permit to be a bully. Tyler opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. You see, Mr. Elias here, the man you called trash, spent 40 years working as a janitor. He retired with a pension that pays him less in a month than you spend on a weekend in the Hamptons. When you threw $3,000 at him, you weren't being generous. You were trying to buy his silence. You were trying to pay him to accept that he is less than you. But in this courtroom, his dignity is not for sale. I leaned forward, looking Tyler straight in the eye. Here is what is going to happen. I am finding you in contempt of court for your behavior today, specifically for answering your phone during these proceedings, and for your dismissive attitude toward the victim. However, the law allows me some discretion when the behavior shows a total lack of remorse. Your Honor, Tyler stammered, his voice losing its edge. I, I said I'd pay the fine. I'm willing to double it, triple it. Oh, we're going much further than that, Mr. Sterling. Since you love market value, let's adjust the fine to a level that actually gets your attention. I am setting the total fine for the reckless driving and the contempt charges at $100,000. The courtroom erupted. I heard a sharp gasp from the gallery. Tyler's jaw literally dropped. He gripped the edge of the podium so hard his Rolex clinked against the wood. 100,000 for a fender bender? That's impossible. That's unconstitutional. What's unconstitutional, Mr. Sterling, is the idea that the law only applies to people who can't afford to ignore it. To a man like Mr. Elias, a $500 fine is a catastrophe. To you, it's a rounding error. If the law is to be equal, the punishment must be felt equally. And I want to make sure you feel this. I ignored his protests and continued. But money alone won't fix a broken character. In addition to the fine, I am sentencing you to 200 hours of community service. And you won't be doing it in a comfortable office. You will be assigned to the city's mobility assistance program. You will be the one pushing wheelchairs. You will be the one helping elderly citizens, people like Mr. Elias, get to their doctor's appointments because someone like you took their parking spot or made them feel too afraid to drive. If you're watching this right now and you think it's about time someone reminded these elites that they share the same world as the rest of us, leave a comment with the word equality. Hit that share button because we are about to see if Tyler Sterling has enough capital to buy back his soul. I looked at Tyler, whose face was now a pale shade of gray. You have a choice, Mr. Sterling. You can pay your lawyers to fight this for the next year, or you can take this shortcut to a better life that I'm offering you. Because the man you are right now, he's the one who's truly bankrupt. Court is in recess for 10 minutes. I suggest you spend them thinking about someone other than yourself. The 10-minute recess felt like an eternity. Usually, when I call for a break, the courtroom hums with the sound of lawyers whispering and spectators stretching. But this time, it was different. The silence was heavy. Tyler Sterling sat at the defense table, his head buried in his hands. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't checking his watch. For the first time, he was staring at Mr. Elias Thorne, who was sitting just a few feet away, quietly sipping a cup of water offered by the bailiff. When I stepped back onto the bench, the room snapped to attention. I looked at Tyler. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his expensive suit now looked like a costume that didn't quite fit. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a young man who looked very, very small. Mr. Sterling, I began, my voice soft but firm. During the break, did you find that shortcut you were looking for? Did you find a way to make this situation go away with a stroke of a pen? He stood up slowly. He didn't parade to the podium this time. He walked like a man carrying a heavy burden. No, Your Honor, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't. Good, I replied, because justice isn't a transaction. It's a transformation. You see, Tyler, I've watched many people like you pass through this room. People who think that life is a ladder where you step on others to get to the top. But you forget one thing. The higher you climb on a ladder of shells, the harder the fall when they inevitably break. I turned to Mr. Elias. Mr. Thorne, you've heard the sentence. You've heard the fine. Does this offer you the peace of mind you were looking for? Mr. Elias stood up, leaning on his cane. He looked at Tyler, then back at me. Your Honor, he said, his voice trembling with age and emotion. I don't care about the $100,000. I've lived on very little my whole life, and I'll be fine with what I have. But what I do care about is that this young man understands that my gray hair doesn't make me invisible. My old car doesn't make me a target. I am a father. I am a grandfather. I am a human being. Tyler's head dropped. A single tear fell onto the mahogany podium. Mr. Sterling, I said, you told this court you were a busy man. Well, I'm going to make you even busier. Your 200 hours of community service will begin on Monday. You will report to the City Mobility Center. You will be assigned to a veteran named Sergeant Miller, who lost both his legs in service to this country. You will be his hands and his feet. You will hear his stories, and every time you look at him, I want you to remember Mr. Elias. I want you to remember that every person you pass on the street is fighting a battle you know nothing about. If you're watching this and you believe that the greatest punishment for an arrogant person is to be forced to show humility, leave a comment with the word humility. Share this video so that every CEO out there knows that in Judge Simpson's court, your title means nothing if your heart is empty. I will accept the sentence, Your Honor, Tyler whispered. I know you will, I replied, because if you don't, if you miss a single hour of that service, or if I hear one report of you being disrespectful to Sergeant Miller or anyone else, that $100,000 fine will be the least of your worries. I will personally see to it that you trade that silk suit for an orange jumpsuit. Do we have an understanding? Tyler nodded vigorously. Yes, Your Honor, we do. I sat back watching him. The lesson had been delivered, but the learning was just beginning. In my court, I don't just hand out fines, I hand out mirrors. And Tyler Sterling was finally forced to look at the man he had become. The following Monday morning did not start in a boardroom or a luxury penthouse. It started in the cramped, bustling hallway of the City Mobility Center. Tyler Sterling arrived wearing a simple polo shirt and jeans, clothes he hadn't worn since he was a teenager. Gone was the Rolex. In its place was a cheap plastic digital watch he'd bought at a drugstore, a tool to track the hours he now owed to society. He was assigned to Sergeant Samuel Miller, a man whose presence filled the room despite the fact that he sat in a motorized wheelchair. Sergeant Miller had lost both legs in a roadside explosion in Fallujah. He was a man of steel and silence, with eyes that could see right through a person's excuses. You're the kid the judge sent, Miller said, his voice like gravel. I don't care who your father is, and I don't care how much your shoes cost. Today, you are my hands and my feet. We have 20 veterans who need to get to the VA hospital for physical therapy. You'll be loading chairs, holding doors, and if someone needs a hand to steady them, you'll be that hand. Understood? Tyler nodded, unable to find his voice. For the next 8 hours, Tyler did more physical labor than he had done in his entire life. He pushed wheelchairs up steep ramps. He helped an elderly woman with Parkinson's stay upright while she waited for her medication. He carried groceries for a blind veteran. But the real shift happened at lunch. Tyler was sitting on a bench, his muscles aching, when Sergeant Miller rolled up next to him. You know, Miller said, looking at Tyler's calloused red hands. Most people who come through here as a punishment spend the whole time looking at the clock, but you're actually looking at the people. Why? Tyler looked down at his hands. I hit an old man, he whispered. I crashed my car into his, and instead of helping him, I threw money at him. I called him trash. Miller was quiet for a long time. My mother used to say that money is like a veil. It makes you feel safe, but it also makes you blind. It hides the fact that we're all just a heart stop away from needing a stranger's help. You weren't just hitting that man, kid. You were hitting your future self. Tyler looked up, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt the sharp, cold sting of genuine shame. He realized that Mr. Elias wasn't a drain on society or a victim. Mr. Elias was a mirror. He was the person Tyler might become, fragile, aged, and dependent on the kindness of others. If you're watching this, and you realize that your strength today is a gift you should use to help the weak, leave a comment with the word service. Hit that share button, because the transformation of Tyler Sterling shows that even the most arrogant heart can be softened when it's forced to carry someone else's burden. I received the first report from Sergeant Miller that evening. It was short. It said, the kid didn't complain once. He stayed an extra hour to help an old vet fix a flat tire on a walker. He's starting to see. I sat in my dark office, the only light coming from the street lamps outside, and I smiled. The $100,000 fine was the price of his crime, but these hours were the price of his redemption. By the third week of his service, Tyler Sterling was a different man. The change wasn't just in his clothes or his tired muscles. It was in the way he looked at the world. He no longer walked as if he were the main character in a movie, and everyone else was just an extra. He had spent 150 hours listening to stories that money couldn't buy. One afternoon, Tyler was assigned to drive Sergeant Miller to a local park. As they sat near a pond watching the ducks, Miller handed Tyler a small, weathered photograph. It was a picture of a young man in a dusty uniform, smiling next to an older man who looked remarkably like Elias Thorne. "That's my father," Miller said. "He was a janitor, just like your trash man. He worked 3 jobs so I could have a pair of cleats for football. He died with nothing in the bank but everything in his heart. When you insulted that man in court, you weren't just insulting a stranger, you were insulting the foundation this country was built on. The hard-working people who don't ask for much, just a bit of space to exist." Tyler stared at the photo. The veil of money Miller had mentioned was gone. He didn't see a drain on society anymore. He saw his own mother, who had suffered a stroke a year ago and was currently in a rehabilitation center, a place Tyler had visited only twice because he was too busy with work. He realized he had been paying for her care with his secretary's time and his father's money, but he had given her 0 of his own heart. "I've been a ghost," Tyler whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was winning, but I've just been haunting my own life." The next day, without being asked and without it counting toward his court-ordered hours, Tyler showed up at the rehabilitation center where his mother stayed. He didn't bring flowers or a check. He brought himself. He sat with her for 4 hours, holding her hand, listening to her struggle to pronounce words, and for the first time in years, he didn't check his watch once. When he returned to the mobility center, he did something even more unexpected. He sat down with a pen and paper. He didn't call his legal team to draft a formal statement. He wrote a letter by hand. It wasn't addressed to the court, and it wasn't meant for the news. It was addressed to Mr. Elias Thorne. In that letter, Tyler didn't offer more money. He offered an apology that had no price tag. He wrote, "Mr. Elias, I was blind, but now I see. I don't ask for your forgiveness because I haven't earned it yet. But I want you to know that because of you, I am finally learning how to be a man. If you are watching this and you believe that true wealth is found in the way we treat those who can do nothing for us, leave a comment with the word awakening. Share this video because the most expensive lesson Tyler Sterling ever learned wasn't the $100,000 fine. It was the realization that he was worth nothing until he started caring for others." I received a copy of that letter from the prosecutor. As I read Tyler's jagged, emotional handwriting, I knew the 100K lesson had worked. He wasn't just paying a fine, he was paying attention. And in the world of justice, that is the greatest victory of all. 2 months had passed since Tyler Sterling first walked into my courtroom with a smirk and a Rolex. Today, he was back, but the atmosphere was different. The gallery wasn't filled with curious onlookers. It was filled with the people Tyler had served. Sergeant Miller was there in the front row, and next to him sat Mr. Elias Thorne, wearing a new modest suit and holding a thank you card. Tyler stood at the podium. He didn't look at his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He looked at me, and then he turned to the people in the gallery. "Your Honor," Tyler began, his voice steady and humble. "I completed my 200 hours of service 3 weeks ago, but I haven't stopped going back. I realized that for 24 years I was a consumer. I consumed space, I consumed resources, and I consumed people's patience. I thought that because I had the money to pay for things, I didn't have the obligation to care for them." He took a deep breath. "I paid the $100,000 fine, but the real debt I owed wasn't to the city treasury, it was to the humanity I had ignored. I've started a foundation within my company to provide free digital literacy training for seniors and veterans. We've already hired 4 people from the mobility center, and every Sunday I take my mother and Mr. Elias to the park. I've learned that the most valuable thing I own isn't my car or my company. It's the time I give to others." I looked at the young man before me. The rich heir was gone. In his place was a citizen. "Mr. Sterling," I said, leaning forward, "in 40 years I've handed down thousands of sentences. Most people pay their fine and disappear, bitter and unchanged. But you chose to transform. You took a moment of shame and turned it into a lifetime of purpose. My father used to say that the measure of a man is what he does when he thinks no one is looking. Well, the world was looking, Tyler, and today they see a man of character." I turned to the audience. "This case is officially closed, but the lesson remains. Justice is not about vengeance, it is about restoration. It is about reminding us that we are all interconnected, from the CEO in the penthouse to the janitor in the basement. When we forget that, we lose our way. When we remember it, we find our soul. If this journey of transformation touched your heart, if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance to become a better version of themselves, leave a comment with the word restored. Subscribe to this channel and share this video, because stories like Tyler's remind us that it is never too late to trade arrogance for empathy and greed for grace. I hit the gavel one last time, not as a threat, but as a period at the end of a beautiful chapter. God bless you all, I said. And remember, how you treat those who can do nothing for you is the only true test of your power.